Good afternoon. I hope you're all enjoying the conference. I'm Sturgeon from Pottinger, the UK's largest PR agency, and I work specifically within our technology division, Harvard. Sorry I can't be with you today in person, but I've been asked just to run down in a couple of minutes some of the approaches you should take from a public relations point of view in approaching Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Mobile World Congress is a date in all of our diaries. It's a major opportunity for our clients. It is, of course, the biggest show of its kind in the industry. So we take it very seriously, and we see the opportunity which exists at Mobile World Congress. We also see the challenges. It's our role to help our clients overcome some of those challenges. Of course, the whole industry comes together. That means journalists, analysts, partners, suppliers, retailers, everybody that you'd be wanting to speak to. The challenge, of course, is finding the time to do so. Not just finding the time for yourselves, but finding time in journalists' diaries, finding time in analysts' diaries. So I'm just going to go over some of the approaches we take to dealing with journalists in the hope that it can stand you in good stead going into the conference. Be aware that journalists are going to be incredibly time poor at Mobile World Congress. They're going to be dashing around from event to event, from panel session to launch to announcement. So you need to do what you can to fit in around them. So it might be the case that you only get 5 or 10 minutes with a journalist at the show. So think about what you really want to tell them in that 5 or 10 minutes. If 10 minutes into the meeting you're still introducing the company and talking about what you do, if you really want to be talking about a product or a service you're about to launch, then you've failed with the opportunity to get that across. You might want to consider pre-briefing journalists ahead of the show, speaking to a journalist under an embargo, giving them the news that you're going to be announcing at the show ahead of time. So they've got an opportunity to ask you questions, you've got an opportunity to make sure you get everything across to them, and there's no danger of you being cut off or interrupted by the general hustle and bustle on the show floor. It might be the case that you do just want to use those 5 or 10 minutes to make a relationship, to sort of introduce yourself to a journalist, possibly over a sort of sociable glass of wine in the evening or something like that. That, of course, brings its own rewards. We shouldn't look at Mobile World Congress as just being a siloed moment in time that exists independent of anything else that's going on with your marketing and PR outreach. This should be the next stage in building relationships with your target journalists. So think about what you want to take away from the show. It might just be business cards, a few relationships which you've started, and it might be that you want to send over more substantive information after the show. So think about that. Think about what your follow-ups can be with all of the journalists you do meet. Don't necessarily think that you have to throw everything at the journalists in the time that you've got. A couple of tactics that I've heard working in the past, of course, journalists like to meet up, they like to be sociable, they like to have a drink. So do think about scoping some good bars, some good venues in the city of Barcelona, which you can use for those purposes. Get your invites in early. Understand that journalists may still only be able to give you sort of half an hour of their time because they're going to have a fairly busy schedule in the evenings as well. Look at who's making the big announcements and make sure you don't clash with those. If there's a big Google announcement, a big Microsoft announcement, big IBM announcement, make sure you don't clash with those, unless of course you are Google, Microsoft or IBM, in which case the clash is inevitable because it's your announcement. But journalists are going to prioritise some of those big news events taking place at Mobile World Congress. Accept that, work around it, and understand what those announcements are yourself. Understand what it means for the story that you're announcing and how you might sort of bounce off those stories. Make yourself relevant to the wider conversation. Ask journalists when you meet them what the big themes are to fit in with that. Because it's far more likely you're going to get coverage for your company, for your product, for your service, if you're part of the wider show narrative. So understand what the big announcements are. Understand what it is that everybody's talking about. A final point that I was asked to address is the potentially tricky question of what does it mean for Israeli companies specifically to be addressing Mobile World Congress and the journalists there. Is it going to be an issue? Is it going to be a benefit? I would say broadly it's a benefit. Perhaps some people might have their own political ideas, perhaps people might have their own objections, but in the main, I think we should move away from the sort of the political conversation because your technology, your services, your products should speak for themselves. You know, if they're good enough, they're going to be of interest to journalists. And Israel has a tremendous track record and very strong heritage of producing innovative technology, particularly in the telecom space. So I would say certainly don't hide that. I think it's a great selling point. But do primarily speak about the benefits and the innovations that you're making, not necessarily where you've been making them, because that is very much a secondary story. So, in closing, I would really say to you, enjoy the show. You know, it is a great opportunity. Everybody does come together. It can be sociable. You know, it's a great opportunity to meet people that perhaps have just been a name on an email up until now. So go there, manage your expectations, understand you're going to have to be fairly flexible because things will change. The best laid plans will fall apart if somebody makes a surprise announcement, if journalists get stuck in traffic. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. So work around that, understand that's going to be what you're up against, and get out there and enjoy it. If you have any questions that you want to send to me, I'll put my email address up here on the screen now. But thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of the conference and enjoy Mobile World Congress. Thank you.